Okay, so during our last session, we were having discussion. There are two things. One by one, we had discussion that starting from this whole section is sort of coming to an end. Tripadadi Anuprananam, that was the Sutra number 38. That you try to sort of extend that pure consciousness that you established during the Turyavastha, and this we would stretch it and make it a part of our everyday life. Tripada can mean Jagrat, Swapna, Susutti, and you try to pull it out and you try to pervade all other aspects. We have had a long discussion on it, and earlier also in the Sutra number 28, the same thing was discussed, that how once you reach a very high state of spiritual epiphany or spiritual realization or meditative unity. Let me put these words. These are imperfect words to capture that particular state or that reality of realization, which a sadhaka, any of us who is into that practice, sort of enters. So, therefore, they are saying that you reach that state and you don't get sort of confused in any manner, but don't let it go. Make it a part of your life. And how do you make it a part of your life? You make it a part of life by doing anuprananam. That is a meditative yogic technique. Why is this advice so important and why he's giving it to us? Because we might ascend to a very high plane and then we are back to a normal life of everyday happenings and we lose ourselves. So, this chapter, the fourth chapter, is so rich with practical spiritual tips as to how we can hold on to our inner unity. And then in the verse number 39, the sutra number aphorism 39, he mentions Chitta Sthitivat Sarira Karana Vahyeshu. Now, you doing Tripadadi Anuprananam, that means that in the inner state, you are able to quickly reach that level. We had a long discussion on it during the last session. Then the challenge is to also take it outside. Like we are working on a product. If there's an industry, they're working on a product, they'll do a lot of R&D, and then that particular software solution or tech solution goes through a lot of testing. If it's a newspaper or a TV channel or something, you'd be surprised that they have dry runs, and it can continue for several weeks, sometimes for months. So one newspaper is produced, nobody reads it. This is only for internal audience, and some people where they send it for free to get feedback what's going on there. The people paid for it. Then they tell them that, yeah, this is now ready for entering into the market. Similarly, the sadhaka, when he's working on his consciousness and he's ready, he has the capacity, he has that internal belief, and all the selection criteria, so to say, he fulfills, he takes it outside, because that is the main challenge. Because we get confused, of course, much of the struggle is in the internal world because we have a lot of past sanskaras. You may have changed job, you may have changed relationships, you may have changed cities where you're staying. You may change your sankalpa, your aspiration, you may change a lot of things. But the most humbling fact is that some of the vasanas are still hiding in us, and these vasanas will pull us back whenever they get a chance. And it's very important to recognize that and never feel things have changed. For if you ask anybody who has been through this, like you have either some minor psychological depression or whatever, or addiction problems, all these people, when they are recovering, the one tip which their mentors and guides keep giving them again and again is be careful about the relapse, because you may get pulled back into that level of an old correlation where you're hanging on to life in a certain way. There is a new correlation. You need to take up the challenge and participate in the new, brand new reality which you have created through your sadhana. Therefore, he's saying, you try to do it Varadaraja says, Antarmukha Swarupayam Avasthayam Na Kayavalam. Don't be very super happy about that internal thing. Hmm? But you rather take it outside, and that is very critical. There is this particular, in the verse number in the Yoga Sutra, in the third chapter, the 12th sutra says, Tataha puna santo ditau tulya pratyayo chittasya ekagrata parinamaha. We have discussed this while doing the sixth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. What happens is that when a person is established in the Nirodha Samadhi, what is advised, what happens is that there are two kinds of pratyayas which are externally oriented and they enslave us and they pull us into the samsara. Like there's a student who was a little disturbed and there was some issues. He had bad company and stuff like that. His parents change his school or he changes his degree course or whatever. He re-enrolls in a new university or a center. Then he has a few habits which were part of his life. He sort of puts them to rest, right? This happened during our student days. So you'd be playing football and cricket and everything. And come the month of February, you do Santi of all these co curricular activities. And then what are you doing? You are all the time sitting in your desk and you're looking at the books and your syllabus and how you're to complete because you got the annual examination sometime in March or April. So those 3 months, February, March, April, or could be January to April, you're completely focused. So one aspect of your life, you're just saying bye-bye, and then you're fully focused on that particular goal which you want to achieve. So Santo Dito Tulya Pratyo, it's a very beautiful thing. The Jnanatmika Vritti arises. Avidyatmika Vritti, prashamyati, it silences itself, it is pacified. You're no more interested. And he's saying that is the state, is chittasya ekagrata parinama. So that is the state, if you're doing sadhana, you reach that particular state. Okay. And in the verse number, this aphorism number 20th, we had discussed, Trishu Chaturtham Tailavad Asechyam. Trishu, in the all three states, Jagrata, Swapna, and Shushupti, Chaturtham, that means that Turiya Dasa, that consciousness. That Turiya Dasa consciousness or that Shiva consciousness with a rich, blissful experience, which is great sampath that you have, that great wealth of your realization, you try to distribute. Like in a family, you have a guy who becomes economically very successful, then he starts distributing the lot of earning he has, gives a lot of gift support of the people in the family. Similarly, once we have reached that higher stage, we'll try to make use of that realization, that awareness of highest consciousness, to start transforming our waking, dream, and deep sleep states. So we're talking about complete internal transformation. Okay. Therefore, he's saying now this is the internal aspect, but he's saying no, 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 no. That is not what we should give you happiness. Then what should give you happiness? He's saying Chitta Sthitivat Sarira Karana Bahyeshu. Whatever you are realizing within, you should be able to extend it and take it to the external world of yours. Okay, and we have already done all the commentaries. What he's saying that whatever you're realizing, so this is the aphorism number 39, you will do it. Now what happens is, even you have that realization and you're established in that Turiya Rasa, what happens because of some kind of as I was telling you, some old bad company resurfaces in your life. One phone call, one WhatsApp message, and you respond. Then he has a game plan to borrow some money from you. He reconnects you. Must have happened in your life. Some old college mate who was a good guy, and then he is into some other life, he's having some issue. He calls you up and he would say, I'm in trouble and can you urgently send this money? And he takes and that's gone. He's not going to return it to you. It can happen. Similarly, he can bring back some habits in you which you have said goodbye to. And who is this guy? Our old sanskaras. They raise their head again, you know, and then they will try and so they'll say avilasad vahirgatihi sambahyasya. Sambahyadi, and then sambahyate yoner yonyantaram niyate iti sambahyah karamatma rupaha pashuhu. That we have done already in the last class. Who is this guy? Is karmatma rupa pashuhu. He has that identification with subha subha vasana, because he is trapped by that anava mala, the karma mala. That level, he likes and dislikes things. He had graduated to a highest plane in which he didn't have too much of external orientation, but he again has that. Then what happens? He has that avilasha. What is that avilasha? There is a beautiful definition of desire. What kind of desire will trouble us? You have a desire to go and sit in meditation. A lot of people say Buddha used to say that if you banish all desires from you, then you will get liberation. But what about the desire to banish desires? This English philosopher John Stuart Mill, when he was criticizing his own father, is criticizing his own father. He was a critique of, he was a utilitarian, but he was a critique of both Bentham and James Mill. James Mill was the father of John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill, a little social sensitive. Then he says, all happiness is the highest goal. They were hedonists, the English hedonists or the utilitarians. But John Stuart Mill had a question about this. He said, yeah, so you want happiness. What about the desirability of desires? Are all desires desirable? He brings in that ethical element. Why am I mentioning it? All desires are not troublesome. If you have desire to meditate, you want to do you want to read a book, Shastra Vasana, better than some kind of low level desire. There are hierarchy of desires and aspirations. So a lot of things that you're saying per se desire isn't bad, depends on what that desire has to do with you. Is it going to make you externally oriented? Is it going to pull you back into the samsara, reignite, forgotten, banished, erased, old, attractions and attachments? What is he going to do to you? And beautifully they mentioned, we have discussed that in the last satsang, apurna manyatatmika, apurna manyata. You are not full, you have a sense of insufficiency. That is the swarupa. When you feel you are not full, you are not complete, you are unhappy with yourself, he's saying avidya khanat. That is the main thing. It's essentially is a state of ignorance where you feel you are not full. You know, because punnamadaha punnamidam punnat punnamudachyate punnasya punnamadaya punnameva vasishyate, but you are not in that state. When you are that atmic state, you will say everything is full and final. Why so? Because you are seeing the adhisthana, Brahma Swarupa everywhere, Shiva everywhere. Then you are not having any trouble. But when you do not have that realization, you feel inferior. When you have studied Vedanta or Siva Sutra or you have done meditation, then you are going, somebody drives in a very expensive car, you're not troubled. You get into your car, so it doesn't create any problem. But then when you are disconnected from that inner awareness of your Swarupa, which is fullness, Satchidananda Swarupa, when you are disconnected from your Swarupa, then your external appearance, how do I look? Do I look good? What am I wearing? Where am I going? What kind of car I'm carrying? How much money I have? All these things will come. And what are these things? In one sentence, apurna manyata. A sense of insufficiency, a sense of deficit. It's a deficit awareness, so to say. And when you have malarupat, is it a good thing? No, it's essentially a form of impurity. Malarupat hetoho, that's the cause. Then what happens? He's saying there is desire, avilasad. because of these factors. So because of ignorance, old sanskaras, right? And then you have a sense of insufficiency. Once you have a sense of insufficiency, you want to fill the gaps. When you want to fill the gaps, you have subhasva vasana. What's right for me? What's wrong for me? When you have that sort of calculation, then you are pushed into the sansara. Then you have vahirgati vishayam unmukhatvam eva bhavati. That is the effect, the consequence of arising of a sense of deficit in us. And that deficit is because we got disconnected with the sense of self sufficiency and that paripurnata or that Sachidananda Swarupa Jnana. When you get disconnected, then you have Vahirgati, because these insufficiencies cannot be filled with meditation and stuff like that. ये सब करने से क्या होगा यार? You focus on your work, make your money, do your house. That's what the elders advise to the youngsters. Anybody says that I'm going to do a bit of meditation, I want to read this book, I'll say, so what does this book give you? What are you going to get out of it? Why don't you work extra hours, make more money, get more incentives, get more bonus? Then bahirgatihi vishurmukhatvam eva bhaveti natu antarmukha swarupa avahitatvam. Swarupa avahitatvam, that swarupa, self-awareness, which is realized with a lot of effort through a practice of remaining introverted, not in a negative sense when people turn introverted because they're angry or introverted, or they have some psychological issues or anxiety. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a state in which a person is not introverted as a result of certain hidden problems, or he's trying to avoid something. He's introverted because he's looking for his own luminous self and he wants to be established there. Through that, what you have, no, that doesn't happen. But you get pulled outside. That we have done, and as a result of this fellow will be pulled into the sansara until there's a person to rescue him out. In Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Bhagavan Bhashyakara Sankaracharya gives a wonderful example that there is a person who is kind of mugged, and you have people who somehow they are kind enough not to kill him. They bind his hands and legs and everything. They put some cloth in his mouth. They abandon him and they take away whatever wealth he had. This guy had come into India, but he was from Gandhara. By the way, that time, the whole thing was India only. India word wasn't there, but it was Bharat or whatever, Aryavart, whatever word you want to use. And then he starts making some noise, muffled noise. He doesn't know how to talk to anybody because he's blinded, he's blindfolded, he can't even see anyone. Listening to him, some Paramakarunika Acharya, he appears in his life. What does he do? He sort of unties him, frees him from that state of bondage, and then he opens his eyes and he enables him to speak, removes whatever cloth or other stuff which was pushed into his mouth, then gives him some water and a little food and says, "Where are you from?" He says, "I'm from Gandhara. How do I go back?" Because he has been kidnapped. Then he's saying, "Look, you have to go in the northwesterly direction," imagining this is the Gangetic Plain, the heartland. Maybe he had come for some darshan to Kashi Vishwanath, or maybe for a dip in the Ganges, it was Mahakumbh or whatever. And then this fellow keeps asking a lot of people, because one guy says, "How do I go?" They will say in an unknown city, "You go straight and then turn to the turn towards your right side." And then, no, you keep asking. The intelligent people who are helpful, they don't give you any wrong direction. They instead will tell you that you have to keep asking the local guys who will tell you. These days, Google Maps also mislead you that you need to verify whatever the map says with some local guys. You keep moving. So these are deshikas. They give you that disha nirdesha, right? You can say Vedanta deshika for one of these Vishishtadvaita acharyas. Similarly, they'll give you that disha nirdesha. They'll give you some idea as to how to move, like the Shastra is giving us disha nirdesha. Then you keep moving. And like they gave an example of an insect which was trapped in a whirlpool of a river in Spain. From one whirlpool to another, it was going. And then there was a compassionate guy who saw that insect and it sort of picked it up and put it on the shore below a tree to relax. Oh my God, where was I? Similarly, when a person with, very interesting, I met him again in this Kumbh Mela. So there was some businessman whose secretary ran away with millions of rupees, and then he had a lot of debt and he was very depressed. And then he talks to his sister-in-law, who suggests something very funny. He says, forget about this money business, you are in problem. We have one Vedanta satsang in Kailasha ashram. Why don't you come and attain it? And that fellow comes and attains it. I had seen him in 2017 or something. He was in big depression. He had lost millions of rupees. And then he came and sat. I don't know if he ever understood anything, but the Jnana Yajna they have after Saraswati Puja for 18 days, he attended those 18 days. And then he went back. I met him again. I said, so how are you? He said, no, things have come to normal. But you see, at that particular moment, that satsang, which has no logical relationship with his economic well being or recovery from the losses he had to incur, magically gave him that energy in the sense, internally corrected some system errors which he had, as a result of which he sort of got into the recovery path. And now, after about, say, 8 years, he's jolly, he's very happy. He's back in the saddle where he was. What is this whole thing? It's a kind of correction. It's a kind of therapeutic intervention of the Acharya or the Guru. So he's saying, Avilasad Vahirgatihi Sambhahyasya. The person, that Karmatma Rupa Pashu, will be pulled into samsara. That's a warning sign given to us. That warning sign happens. Then how do we get out of it? This is not being given to us for the first time in Siva Sutra, because that is the technique they adopt to enable us to recognize that this path in sadhana, for that matter in business, for that matter in life, is not a straight line. First thing that we have to understand is to accept that it's going to be full of ups and downs. We have to recognize how to recover ourselves, how to rescue ourselves, how to move forward. At the same time, constantly, we have to stay aware and alert that slipping down is just one of the most possible possibilities. We might just slip any time. And then how to sort of get up and move forward. Because we have, Veda Tiraskare, just imagine. Earlier, in the verse number 35, Moho Pratisangatastu Karamatma, right? Tad Vimuktastu Kevali. Again and again, you will see there. What happens in a sadhak's life, if you look at this Siva Sutra, you would understand again and again. And even in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna comes up with these questions about downfalls. Do you think so? I'd be able to control my mind? It's so difficult. Bhagavan gives an answer. So he brings into discussion the human weaknesses and frailties which prevent the aspirant for inner unity, yeah, and integration. Again and again he fails, but how to move forward. And Bhagavan gives that advice again and again there. And therefore, now we would sort of graduate to the next sutra. What happens? Is he going to be in that eternal hell, or he'll sort of eternally born in hell? No, not so. Therefore, in the aphorism number 41, he said, Tasmin turye pade tadarudha pramites tatshayat jiva sangshayaha. Earlier, again, we have seen, then you have that avidya sanghara, then you shall not have any rebirth. We have done that aphorism earlier. Okay. Similarly, he is saying tadarudha pramitehe. Now, what was this downfall, by the way? Sambhahyasya avilasad bahirgatihi. Bahirgati is what? Bahirgati was in very simple. You have that puryastaka Pamatritva. When you are in a state of inner meditation, when you are stayed in that spiritual enlightenment, then you are not identified with your economic self, Homo economicus. You are not identified with your physical self. You are not identified with your emotional self. None of these. Why? Because you are in a state of panchokoshatita, avasthaitara shakshi. That is Atma. And you are there. Therefore, these lower level identities and consciousness or awareness, whatever you call it, they don't affect you. Whatever we do is according to the operating system of that level of programming. So you are programmed in a certain way, you have opened that window, it functions in a certain way. And when you dump all these programs and you have that ultimate thing, operating system is corrected, flushed out, all windows are closed, then you go to that ultimate level, which is that Brahma consciousness or Shiva consciousness. So what he's saying is that that identification with body, with mind, or Puryashtaka, which is the Karana Sarira, or whatever you call, so the Sukshma Sarira, you abandon that identification, then you will have what? Chit Pramatrita. You have that identification with the pure Aham Brahmasmi, Shivoham. That is the original consciousness. That is our Swarupa. We are tainted and tempered because of our low level pulls and sometimes pushes, which trouble us through our path as we move forward in our sadhana life. However, he's saying tadarudha pramitehe. Tad arudha. What is that tad? Tad means that turya pada. Tasmin turya pade arudha tad vimarsha para pramitihi samvityasya yogina. Tadarudha pramitehe. Tad means that turya padarudha pramitehe. That pramata, that consciousness, pramiti, that consciousness, which is established in the fourth state, that is beyond Jagrada, Swapna, and Sushupti, that Turyavastha, okay, that Bhairavapatti, that Khechari Mudra. There are so many words in which we have talked about that stage. When a person is established in that stage, Tadarudha Pramitehe, of that consciousness, that yogi, the person who has that consciousness, if you do Bahubri, Tasya Abhilasha Khyayat. You have what kind of Abhilasha? Apurna Manyatatvika Avidyakhyana. That is the name. Avidyakhyanat Avilasat. That is the desire born out of ignorance, and sort of you have a pent up frustration because you are wrongly, unnecessarily putting yourself down as I'm not this, I'm not this, not in a best Vedantic way, but you think, I'm not yet rich, I'm not so good, everybody's better than me, where am I, I'm being exploited, all kinds of a low level consciousness that a person has. Then he wants to be better. Then he is entering into the world of strife and struggle. Then he becomes a karmatma rupa pashu, right? And then he's saying what? That desire, that abhilasha, tasya abhilasha kshayat. Why the abhilasha is destroyed? Look, we have done that also in the Bhagavad Gita in that chapter. It's possible to silence your mind by remaining hungry. By remaining hungry in what sense? Metaphorically, by disconnecting yourself from objects of your desire. There's a boy who is very fond of watching films. In old days, school boys especially used to have that problem. Teenagers, they would like to see a lot of movies in India. What the parents used to do, just guard that he doesn't go in the evening or afternoon with any friends so that he can't go to any film hall. You switch off the television. These days, parents take away the phones because there's no way you can control your child. So when you disconnect, that fellow obviously willy-nilly sits in his study room. He doesn't have anywhere to go. But he can still have craving in him. When he gets genuinely interested in his studies, no, he's not anymore externally oriented. Similarly, saying tasya abhilasa khya jivasya sambhaya sambhahyatmanaha, sambhaya, that karmatma rupa pashu, That is that guy, Jivatma. Now, Puryastaka Pramatri Bhavasya, the person who is identified with that Shukshma Sarira, now Abhilasa is gone. That desire which was pulling him down is gone. You have removed that virus. Once you have removed that virus, what happens is Sankshayaha Prashamaha Sanjayate Chinamatra Mayata Eva Spurati Sa Ityarthaha. What is silenced? That he's saying Jiva Sankshayaha, that Jivatma Rupa, that limited consciousness that I'm a Jiva, I'm insufficient, I'm going to die, I'm scared, I have all kinds of problems. That sort of gets minimized and ultimately is removed. Okay, so Bhagavad Gita says what? It's possible that you can silence yourself. Niraharasya dehinaha. You can do that. But ultimately, when you get liberated, param drishtva nivartate, when you are able to remove any aspiration or desire from objects of illusory happiness, whatever you think is perfect, param drishtva, when you see that you have atmajnana, therefore you don't have any reason to have craving for the lower level ends of life, goods and whatever pleasures and privileges, they don't disturb you anymore. And you are able to. And remember, it's quite possible that in a high state of vairagya, a person walks away from a. There's so many books now, circulating. This millionaire who becomes a monk and stuff like that. That monk who has become a monk, if he stops doing his sadhana, if he doesn't do his sadhana, he'll become worse than what he was earlier. Because earlier he had a qualification, he had some experience and some skills and some network. He could try and fulfill some of his desires. You have chosen a new spiritual life. But if you stop doing your sadhana, you're worse off because you don't have any means to fulfill these desires. And the desires are coming back. It's a very bad thing. Therefore, you need to ensure that you are staying in that highest level of self-awareness, the state of Siva consciousness. You are full until you become, in addition to being full, also final. That anuttara dasa, unless you reach there through sadhana, you have to eliminate. So both the sides is mentioning. One side he mentions the moment you have desire, then you have bahirgati. You will again get trapped in the samsara. And this desire is emerging in all of us out of that anadi avidya, which is sitting in us. Unwanted guest doesn't want to leave. This anadi avidya is very cunning. She has convinced us that I'm your best friend. I'm going to give you all this. What is Jnana going to give you? And you are trapped. But once she goes, she lets us free, then you are free from a lot of trouble. Provided this absence of avidya is supported by that paramartha jnana. Now let's look at the commentary. Yadatu paramesha sakti patavasa unmishitam swam swabhavam eva vimrishyati. Yadatu, however, bahirgamanu had happened. The person had gone back into the samsara. He was trouble again. Now he is returning. Maybe with the help of a Paramakarunika Acharya, maybe because of his Purva Punya. Sometimes you want to commit an error, I'm telling you. I mean, if you're washed yourself, you will realize that even if you want to sin, you can't sin. Let me tell you this. There are powerful punyas which will prevent you. You must have seen that in your lives. Powerful punyas will stand in between you and some kind of confusion. If there is powerful punya, and sometimes you have this powerful papa, when you are trying to aspire and be at a higher level, you go to a temple or something, some purva pratibandhaka will come and trap you and pull you down. Where are you going? It's not important. There's a cricket match going. Let's go and watch it. So it depends on a lot of prarabdha. Therefore, if we keep saving punya, they sort of become very useful at these moments. When there is some downward pull, they come and prevent it. They stand in between, because God cannot do injustice. He has to reward you for your past punyas and punish you for our past papas. And therefore, he cannot tempt us. Bhagavan says, those who are having this Asuri Sampad, I will tempt them again and again, because my goal is to trouble them, punish them, send them to hell again and again. At the same time, he says, Yoga Kshemam Vahamyam. The ones who surrenders everything and is at my feet, I do everything to connect him with or her with whatever he deserves spiritually, materially, and also enable him or her to sort of enjoy the benefit of that particular yoga. Here, yoga is getting what you don't have. Yoga Kshemam Vahamyam. So Bhagavan does both these things. He does good and bad. Depends on who are we, what we are doing. Therefore, he's saying, Jivasya Sambhahyatmanah Puryashtaka Pramatri Sankhya Prashamaha. This Jivatma Bhava is kind of reduced, Prashamaha, and finally pacified, Sanjayate. What stage? Chinmatra Mayata Eva. Chinmatra Mayataya Eva. So you have that Sambit thing, you have that pure chit consciousness, no more troubled by the samsara, but the highest Shiva consciousness, spurati, sa ityartha. This fellow, and then the commentators will also say that he'll regain all his spiritual powers. Some guy is filing for bankruptcy. There's some problem, some debt problem, and the industry and everything is in problem. His accounts are seized. He cannot do anything. He cannot take any more loans. He cannot set up a business again. He's caught up in a legal wrangle with the federal authorities. Then that case is disposed of. What happens? He has a lot of skills. He has a lot of contacts. He has some assets lying here and there. Then he sort of reunites. He brings them together, remobilizes his contacts, his assets, his skills, everything. Then in a couple of years, you again see some news in which he's taking up some new project. How did that happen? There was a particular pratibandhaka or obstacle. He was able to remove it. But he did suffer when the obstacle was sitting right at his doorstep. Similarly, the sadhaka, when there is an obstruction which emerges because of purva papa or sadhana or inability to focus on his sadhana, he allows things to pass. He's troubled. He is in trouble. And then what happens? He reconnects with his divine self, with the Shiva consciousness. He starts doing his sadhana and he reaches that higher echelons of, that integrity, that samadhi, and as a result of which he is no more troubled by these, troublesome friends who are coming to sort of pull him asunder from all sides. He's able to keep them at bay. And then he's returning to that highest state of Swatantra Bhava. Apurna Manyata and Swatantra Hani, they are removed. Then he has that Sachidananda Surupata. Let's look at the commentary. Yadatu Paramesa Saktipasa Basa Unmishitam. Because there is a bit of Ishwara Anugraha which is required. Somebody has to come to help you out of that situation. Swang Swabhavam Eva Bimrishyati. He doesn't think anymore about his money and his physical health and social identity and blah, blah, blah. He's established in himself and he's talking about his Swarupa. Tada, then the moment he reconnects with that divine consciousness, what happens with him? Abhilasa abhavat. He doesn't have any craving for these low level things. Abhilasa abhavat na asya vahirgatihi. Then he is no more extroverted. Extroversion is essentially a work of avidya or ignorance. So you have a lot of distractions. That beautiful sentence of Bertrand Russell, my professor used to quote often. In modern life, we are kind of distracted from distractions by distractions. Nothing is so meaningful. So you're reading a news piece on your phone, there's a phone call, and somebody calls you to a party, and then you're going to the party, and there is a phone call, there's a meeting in the office, and what kind of meeting? It's a farewell party. They're, distracted from distractions by distractions. Whatever is not about your inner self is a distraction, spiritually speaking. It's not about your job or house or family. This is slightly better than other things because you become a nishkama karma yogi. But ultimately, from the perspective of atmic jnana, everything else is some kind of a distraction. So he's saying, Sohava eva vimrishyati, then he starts doing vichara, tada abhilasa abhavat, and therefore he doesn't have any craving anymore, no asya bahirgatihi, therefore he will not have that extroversion. Apitu atma ramata eva. He becomes some atma rama. He's happy. He relishes in his self-awareness. Atma ramata eva nityam ityaha. Nitya means, it extends and sustains itself. It's not for a couple of seconds and hours. It's not like that. It stabilizes again. Tad iti purva nirdishta sambetritatmani turyapade. Tad iti. When you have purva nirdishta, earlier you were there in that turyavastha, then you had a vahirgati because avilasa, it appeared in you, so you became a little disturbed, you become externally oriented. Like it happened with Vishwamitra, you had that one of the celestial beauties of Indra Devata went and disturbed him. Then he realized his error. Then there was this guy called Trishanku. He came and said that I supported your family. When he was in deep meditation in the sadhana, he had supplied food to them, and then he came and I am going to send you, what do you want? I want to go to Swargaloka, but he didn't have enough punya. So Vishwamitra created another Swarga. There was some negotiation, and Trishanku was finally taken to the real Swarga. But Vishwamitra lost a lot of his spiritual energies. His spiritual arsenal was halved. He said, oh, I have lost a lot of energy. So he went back into meditation. That's what happens. What happens is that taditi avilasa kshayat jivasya pramiti sambitasya joha. Sambetri Paramatmani Turyapade, he gets back to that fourth state, Swam Turyapade Arudaha Tad Vimarsana Paraha. What do you mean by that particular Tadarudha Pramitehe? You are re-established there. Where? In that Turyapada. How do you do it? He's saying, no, it's essentially Vimarshana Paraha. Arudha means you're constantly thinking of Siva Sutra. Returning, you see, this is the beauty of Bhakti Yoga, Ramanujacharya, or Saiva Darshan and all. This Sitaram Onkaranatha, there's a spiritual parampara in Bengal, and they have 3-4 ashrams in Puri. I've been to one of the ashrams. I had a good discussion with the person who manages them. The beauty of him was that he was Vedanti par excellence, but he kept telling his devotees that you get to practice devotion. Don't you have any illusions about yourself? Vedanta is fine, Advaita Vedanta is fine, but you have to have that saranagati, you have to have that sense of surrender, lest some form of ego comes and creates a bigger hurdle for you, despite all your reading of scriptures. Similarly, what he mentions, what is that arudha? Tad vimarshana para. You are doing that vichara. The best way to reconnect with our inner spiritual consciousness is to think about the self and what Shastra says, and then do meditation, and then you reconnect. Pramitihi sambit asya yoginaha tasya, of that particular yogi, who is again re-established in that Swarupa Jnana, what happens? Tadati avilasa kshayat. Tad kshayat, he mentions. Tad kshayat. Tad means what? Tad means avilasa kshayat. Avilasa kshayat. Tad means avilasa kshayat. Jivasya sambhayatmanaha. What kind of jiva? A guy who's looking, he's a mumukshu? No. Sambhahyatmanaha, the one who jumps from one life to another because of his subha karma vasana. Puryastaka pramatri bhavasya kshayaha prashamaha. So you have that sukshma sarira, you are identifying with it, whether it is, all these elements. You have these, the pancha pranas, you leave them aside. Then you have these, your pancha jnanendriya, pancha karmendriya, mana buddhi, whatever in Vedanta, and they have their own way of looking at it. That you have this pancha bhuta and mana buddhi ahankara, that sukshma sarira puryashtaka pramatri bhavasya kshayaha prasamaha. You are no more limited because you're connecting with the pure consciousness. Therefore, you're not your intellectual self, you're not your emotional self, you're not your social or economic self. Chit pramatru taya eva spurati ityarthaha. What kind of a pramata he is? Sivoham. That sort of a self-awareness he has. That self-awareness is not a limited self-awareness, apitu, but it's that universal Shiva consciousness. You remember that you will have Atma Vyapti, at the highest level he has Shiva Vyapti. That is the Unmana stage. Atma Vyapti is the Samana stage, but he is suddenly hitting that Samana stage or goes beyond that. Yatha Sopna Nubhutarthan Prabuddha Naiva Pashyati. He's giving an example. How does it work out? He said, look, why this fellow can suddenly reunite and absolutely is fine and there's no trouble. He behaves as if there was no trouble. He's saying, look, Yatha Sopna Nubhutarthan Prabuddha Naiva Pashyati. A person was in deep sleep. A little baby. The baby, she cries in the middle of the night. The mother realizes what happened to my child. She puts on the lamp, looks at the baby. Has she wetted the bed? No, no bed wetting. Then what happened? Is there an insect or something which bit my child? No. What happened? Is it hungry? She tries to feed the baby. No. Then she realizes maybe my child saw some dream. Okay. And so what happened? There's a tiger. There's no tiger. Come. Then hugs the baby. The baby is back into sleep in a state of reassured self-confidence. Similarly, once a person is re-established in that Turiya Bhava, in that Turiya Pada, he is peaceful, he's happy. Then what happens? Yatha Swapna Nuvurtarthan Prabuddha Naiva Pashyati. There are a lot of fears and anxieties. I saw a very tricky thing. That's what I'm saying in Banaras. While coming back, I saw in a tea shop, there's a guy who's serving tea, but maybe he's mentally he has some trouble. And some people are showing some picture. He's showing his wife and his sister or mother's pictures to him, and he doesn't look at it. He's scared. I said, what happened? Who are this lady? He's saying, my wife and my mother. Now, why is he looking away? Then the tea shop guy told me, I don't know what's the long story behind it. He says he's scared of looking at any woman's face because he thinks they are the spirits and energies who's going to attack him. He's scared of ghosts. Any picture he gets scared. So there's some deep trauma because of which he behaves like this. Right? This is how it happens. This fellow, imagine he's treated by a well-trained psychiatrist or healer. He takes some medicine. Whatever. Maybe mild depression, schizophrenia, whatever he has, God knows. Then he will be using his social media, watching a lot of reels after some time. Similarly, this Atmajnani, who had become Bahirgati Shila, once he recovers that Turiya Avastha, then he's at peace. The way a person who sees a lot of things in his dreams and gets scared, he or she has a nightmare, when he wakes up, does he see that tiger or dinosaur chasing him? No, he doesn't see it. Naiva pashyati tatha bhavanaya yogi sansaram naiva pashyati. Now, the beautiful thing we have to mark here is Prabuddha yogi, Prabuddha jiva, the person who has woken up from sleep doesn't see the objects of his perception during dream state. He doesn't see. The Swapna Vishayas he doesn't see, whether it's a good or bad thing. He was watching a cricket match, he was being coronated as an emperor, whatever he was seeing, he doesn't accept it once he wakes up. Similarly, so waking up is the drishtanta. Waking up. Now, how we try to engineer that state, that particular waking up thing, that particular step in our lives, he's saying, Tatha Bhavanaya Yogi. The yogi similarly wakes up through what? What do you mean by waking up? Bhavanaya, that bhavana. We have to do that chintana. We have to do that atma chintana, that satsang and that reading and everything. Bhavanaya yogi sansaram naiva pashyati. You have sansara physically available to your ears and eyes and your nose. You have these jnana indriyas and they connect with objects of their knowledge, of perception. But he looks at them like a dream. He doesn't consider them as fundamentally, ultimately real. That means he's not troubled or enamored by them. He doesn't see means essentially, doesn't mean he becomes blind. He looks at the whole samsara. However, he's not troubled or enamored because he's in a state of inner equanimity as a result of his return to the process of meditation, the process of this vimarsana or vichara. He has returned to that atmastha sthiti. Tatha nirasya sad asad vrittihi sangsritya padam antaram bihaya kalpanajalam advaitena paraparam. This is beautiful. How to do sadhana is mentioning. Nirasya sad asada vrittihi. Sadavritti and asadavritti. You have klishta and aklishta vrittis in Yoga Sutras. There's some sadvrittis, maybe some punya oriented and asadvritti, papa vrittis. You, flush them out. No disturbances. Sangsritya padam antaram. Where are you going? Good and bad both? Nietzsche wrote that beautiful book, Beyond Good and Evil. Actually, this Advaita consciousness is beyond good and evil. It's beyond Subhasva Bhavana. So, Padam Antaram, you are in that inner state of qtitude, but it's not a psychological manipulation. It's a state of internal integration, self awareness. It's Vicharatmaka. Bihaya Kalpana Jalam. All kinds of kalpanas you have. This is sansara. If I do it, I'm going to achieve it. Bihaya. Banish them, remove them. Advaitena paraparam. Para and apara. There are a lot of apara siddhis you have. House, car, culture. Then there are some para and apara both. Bigger ones, subtler ones, external ones, whatever. Paraparam. Advaitena. Abandon them. Yaha swatma niroto nityam. And then you are established and you are absolutely not disturbed by anything external to you. Kala graseka tatparaha. Okay. Kala grasa eka tatparaha. And then, you go beyond time. You're not sort of depressed or you are not absolutely troubled by anything. You establish ultimately in that. Kaivalya pada vag yoga. What kind of things? Kaivalya pada vag. You want to enjoy that state of ultimate bliss, Sachidananda Swarupa. Sa nirvana padam lavet. He gets nirvana. There is no more any movement of janma and amrityu and stuff like that. You get liberated. Iti kaivalya pada bhagini indriya tanamatra vir asambayaha. So indriya, whatever troubled by your sense organs, you're pulled from all sides. When you are able to disconnect and you are reunited with your pure super consciousness, then he's saying how we can again overcome whatever obstacle had created extroversion or bahirgati in us. There is another commentary. Just let's have a quick look at it. Yogi janaha tattva vivekena param nivritim moksha dharma papnuvati. All the yogi people doing tattva viveka, vichar about what is that tattva, what is that atma tattva, what is that shiva tattva. Param nivritim, that means ultimate. Moksha dharmam papnuvanti, he gets liberation. Evam cha sarvatha karmatva rupa paseihir vimuktaha. This which ties us up with different assignments in life, karma pasha vimuktaha bhavanti tadabhave pasesu badhyante sambhahyasya jayante. That was the last sentence of the commentary for the last aphorism. Otherwise, if you don't do it, you'll be trapped. Yada punaha asau. And again, that particular yogi purushaha, mahesana sakti pata basan unmishita atmiyam eva rupam paramshyati, because of God's grace and his anugraha, because of his purva punya or any acharya daya, he again gets it. He has that shaktipada. And atmiyam eva rupam paramrishati, he does vichara about that, his self, his swarupa, tada asya avilasasya abhavat. That avidyatmaka, apurna manyatatmaka, atmika avilasha, it doesn't engage him anymore. It becomes absent, it's flushed out. Na eva bahirgatir parapatit, then bahirgatir apatit, then this person is no more externally oriented again. Apitu swatma ramata eva ityaha, but he becomes happy with himself. Tadarudha pramitehe tatshaya jiva sankshayah, because when you are established in that turiya rasa, because tad kshayat means that avilasha kshayat, he is established, jiva sankhya, you get liberation. Purvokta chidananda chamatkara rashamrita turyati tapade, what I have explained earlier, chidananda chamatkara rasa amrita turya pade, all these adjectives is mentioning. We have discussed that what is chamatkara, that magical state. That blissful state. Sambit prakasa paramarshe. What is that? You have prakasha and vimarsha. That prakasha, chit. Sambit prakasa paramarshe vishwotirna nija ahanta samavesita chetasaha. What kind of a person he is saying? Vishwotirna. He's Vishwamaya and Vishwotirna. That is Shiva. Vishwotirna, he transcends this reality. Nija ahanta samavesita chetasaha. Then he is fully established in his self-awareness, is that Atmajnana, Swaprabuddha Yogi Purushaha, this person who is enlightened, that Yogi Purusha, Apurna Manyatatmaka, Anavamalalupa Abhilasha Chayat. That Anavamala is forgetfulness about who you are, and therefore you have lower order desires, you entertain aspirations which are not befitting so far you are concerned, then they are kind of banished. Then he's saying, Jivatva bhavana sambhaya rupa karamatmana puryastaka pramatrita api na asya kevalam prasamyati. In that kind of a person, not only that limited self-awareness or limited animalistic or humanistic consciousness that drives into the sansara becomes silence. Not only that, something more. What is that? Kintu satada chinmatara rupena eva spurati. All the time he becomes luminous with that self-awareness of that Shiva Tattva. Tatha cha uktam yatha swapna nuvatarthan prabuddha naiva pashyati tatha bhavanaya yogi sansaram naiva pashyati. A person who wakes up from dream, he doesn't see the objects of dream. Similarly, the Atmagya Purusha is not troubled, not attracted, not distracted by the sansara. Yatha swapna dasayam, the way in your dream state. Ati swalpangshe chitra vichitrateya, in your state, in dream state. You are seeing two elephants playing badminton. Where? In your bedroom. It's quite possible. All these things you see in your dream. Anubhutayani, giri guha, sarite, sagara, upavana, purodini, all kinds of things you see. You might see yourself in a beautiful garden. You might see that you are back in your school, and in some new school in some other country, there are different perceptions. We don't know how many countries where all we are born. So you see lots of things in your dreams. All this, it could be a city, it could be an ocean, it could be a garden, all that. And giri, mountain, or a cave, vastuni, paramarthato, asantyapi, they don't exist fundamentally, but you see them in your dream state. Tattada avabhasan prabuddha prani, once you wake up, do you see them? No, you don't see them. Chidatmanaha swatantriya vilasitani avimanyate tatha eva. He remembers, he becomes full and final. He's not troubled by anymore. It's like a child who's crying. This is the best example we can give to ourselves. The child is lost in a crowd and the baby is crying, 3-year-old boy or girl, and suddenly mother appears. Baby is completely silent. There's no trouble, nothing. Reuniting with the mother of the child is like we reuniting with our divine consciousness. She's the right mother in us. And he's saying that आभासान् प्रबुद्धः प्राणी चिदात्मनः स्वातंत्र्य विलसितानि अभिमन्यते तथैव जाग्रत काले युवे इन waking state स्वातंत्र्य udbhasitam chidrupataya. That swatantra udbhasita, that you have that sovereignty, and then all these things, anabhasanat chidabhinnam shivamayam eva vishwam, then there is no bheda vritti and everything is one and you are Shiva, Shivoham. Shivamayam eva vishwam bhavana parinispatya, when you have that kind of meditation, paryalochana sadhaka purushasya, doing the sadhana, okay, paryalochanatah sadhaka purushasya sansar drishti vilopa bhavati. Sansaram naiva pashyati, he doesn't see the sansara, he's saying, look, sansara drishti vilopa bhavati. He doesn't have the eyes of a sansari. This I will do. That kind of a lower order of consciousness and a calculative intelligence. You may be cunning, spiritually or materially. So that sansarika vrittis, they will become pacified. Ittam sambit puranasya eva, of the sambit purana, viparita bhavanaya sansara drishtihi. Oh, beautifully said. That luminous